Welcome everybody to the Theta Power Hour. I'm Brenda B. Bailey. I am a Theta Healing Master as well as instructor. And we do this every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. I love that the time changed and I get to call it Central Standard Time. And I always interview really cool people, people in the know, influencers, and people who have a lot of knowledge. So I'm excited that today I get to interview Miss Ona Christie Martin. So welcome. I'm going to introduce you now. Let's see. So Ona is a visionary artist, writer, and energy healer who's been described as spiritual jumper cables. She uses a unique mentoring process called soul visioning to help her clients find peace in the spiritual awakening process and get into their own miracle zone as divine creators of their own lives. So Ona's art has received awards both regionally and nationally. Her paintings carry a high frequency vibration that helps to activate sacred healing energy within you. She is especially known for her connection with spirit animals and is the creator of Spirit Animal Awareness Oracle card deck. She can also be found on YouTube at Art of Awakening. That's her channel. So welcome, Ona.
Thank you so much, Brenda. It's such a pleasure to be here.
So she also, her YouTube channel, you guys need to check it out because she also interviews really interesting people as well and gives out good information too. So, and of course,
Yeah, like you, right?
I've been on it, right?
You've
So
been
let's
on it,
go
yeah.
ahead. Let me ask you, Ona, so what is spiritual awakening and why is it important at this time?
Oh, that's an awesome question, and especially today, and I'll get to that in a bit. But spiritual awakening is a process that a person will go through at a certain point in their life. Now, not everybody in this lifetime is going to go through a spiritual awakening, but more and more people are starting to experience it. And it's when we start to come, many of us have, are in fact, the vast majority of people, I think, in the world right now are more or less more in their kind of like their body and their mind, a lot in their mind. And during a spiritual awakening process, you begin to become aware of new levels of being. So you become more attuned to and aware of the spiritual realm. And there's a lot of stuff that happens and that actually goes on beyond our five senses, right? We talk about a sixth sense. Well, that's the spirit realm, right? That's the ether that we tune into. And no, I'm not a scientist, but science is starting to recognize more and more that there's things like morphogenetic fields and so forth, and that is what they call the ether. I can't explain the science, but I certainly experience, what it feels like to tune into that. So if you've ever had something like the phone rings and boom, you know who it is and you pick it up and it's that person. Or if you've had, a dream of somebody, sometimes a prophetic dream, or just that sense that, oh, something's not quite right here, right? And that's without any like logical reason, but that it turns out that your gut instinct was correct. That's tuning into your intuition, into that spiritual realm. And during a spiritual awakening, this becomes enhanced, and so people start to experience sometimes very strange things. A lot of times you start seeing synchronicities and number sequences. You start maybe knowing things somehow and you can't explain how you know them, but they turn out to be true, right? Or you start feeling just connections. You may start getting dreams that really, and you start understanding the meanings of things like that. You may start becoming aware of like spirit beings, whether it's spirit animals, angels. Some people are aware of the deceased and that kind of thing. So it is, it can be a very, very beautiful process. Sometimes it can be a little scary or frightening.
So do you feel like that it happens at any time for people? There are certain times that it happens for people.
Um, there are certain times, uh, let me address this because this is a multi-part thing. A lot of times it's with an individual, it will happen in conjunction with trauma or great change in their lives. A lot of times, if you get things like losing a job, losing a relationship, having people pass away, whatever it is, things that kind of create stress or trauma. These can sometimes trigger a spiritual awakening, or as you go through your spiritual awakening process, sometimes you end up, lots of things will shift for you. You might move, all these things might happen. But really, really stressful periods can sometimes actually trigger this to happen. Sometimes I feel like every person is going to experience a spiritual awakening at some point, whether it's you may or may not believe in reincarnation, but I do, so I'm going to say it this way, whether or not it's in this lifetime or another one, you will eventually experience it. But at this time, we're seeing more and more people on the planet beginning to experience this. And the reason is that the planet itself is a spiritual being, just like each of us are. We are actually part of the spiritual being of the planet, just like our cells in our body are part of us, but they each all have their own existence as well. And so the planet is in this ascension process, meaning its vibration is rising. And it's sort of like an awakening of the planet, which means that a lot of us are feeling this, and a lot of people, even people that never thought about anything spiritual in their lives before, are starting to experience some of these things. Also, this time of year in particular, this late fall, is often a time where it's easier to access those spiritual realms. And this particular day, this 11/11, the number sequence 11/11 is actually a kind of an activation code for spiritual awakening. And so this is a specific day that is very, very strong in these energies, and that it is a little bit easier to tune into things that may trigger you or tune into that spiritual realm. So
And when
and
you look
actually I
at
have,
something, right, when you look at that, and what's really kind of interesting, right, is that um, this just happened to be the date that was available for Own It a Book in, right?
yeah,
And it's on 11/11.
yeah,
And
it was. It's
so,
funny.
we look at synchronicities, and I had to laugh as well, because we've just finished like a major, like 40-ish days that have been intense for people. So
Yeah.
again, we booked this out months in advance. So it just happens to be on this date, and it just happens to be at the end of a really intense time for most individuals. So I say it all the time. I'm going to say it again. If October felt like a difficult month, if it felt like things were getting stirred up, welcome to, mass consciousness, right? Because I think it was happening for everyone, right? For everyone in
Yes.
one way, shape, or form. And things were happening. I always kiddingly say, I had, paid off my car and then realized that I needed to get a new one, and was kind of just sitting back with it. And I kiddingly say that I think Creator just was like, okay, well, that didn't, like that didn't push her buttons enough to stir it up. So then my computer crashed, and that was enough to stir it up.
There you go.
The car, not a big deal. And it's always really interesting when you look at things like this, that, the car is considered the embodiment of who we are in our journey.
Right.
And, new car. And of course, for myself, the computer is how I make my living.
Right. Right.
So interesting that it happened in the month of October. They both were replaced in the month of October. And, these are the things, and I say this to not for people to have an excuse, but to have a little bit of mercy on themselves.
Right.
Like it was a difficult
Absolutely.
time. And I feel like a lot of times people, because I think it's just human nature, you know, that we kind of think like we're the only ones that are going through this, especially things like this, which is why it's beautiful and that you get to benefit from me interviewing Ona so that you can understand and relate and know that you're not alone.
Oh, absolutely. You're not alone and you're not going crazy, because that's the one thing that I think a lot of people, come to this point, all this stuff starts happening and they may not have ever heard of anything like this before. And I mean, I've had multiple people come to me and say, am I going crazy? And no, you're not. You're not. I mean, not to say that, like, if you are concerned about, you can always go and check in with, your mental health professional, especially if you're getting things that are, feeling scary to you. But I want to say that your mental health professional may not understand what this is. And so be careful, because you may get into this whole loop of pharmaceuticals. And I'm not dissing the mental health establishment, but if you're dealing with the mental health professional who doesn't understand spiritual awakening, they may actually tell you you're crazy, and you're probably not. Okay, most people, this starts to happen, and it's really something spiritual is activating in them, and it's outside of the realm of what we're taught and trained and have probably experienced in our lives. It may feel like you're going crazy, and that's why it's important to be in touch with others who have gone through the process, and people who can help you, guide you through in a way that is safe, and you know it's always going to be a journey, and it's always going to entail some degree of challenge, but it doesn't have to be as difficult as a lot of people experience, when you know what's going on and somebody can help you through it.
And we'll touch on that. Again, I always say, if this sounds like, oh, so and so needs to hear this, or I need to hear this type thing, tag, share it. I find it so, I love the synchronicity that we're talking about this, because it's not quite over. And the deal is that until you're willing to look at it, it'll keep bumping up against you.
Right,
So
right.
to deny it is, it's not the answer here. And so I know that you had mentioned a little bit, but is there anything else that they need to know about what major challenges they would have? Oh no.
Well, one thing I do want to bring up is that we're so used to putting things in boxes. And yes, this is a spiritual awakening, but that we've got a spiritual body, we've got a mental body, we've got an emotional body, we've got a physical body, right? And that when one of them starts to change, it's going to affect all of the others. So when you're having a massive spiritual awakening, you may experience physical symptoms. You may experience kind of mental changes. You may experience, well, you almost certainly are going to experience emotional, experiences. And any of these, it can manifest in any of these ways. So that it's important to be aware of that too. Um, and it will also be important to be aware of that this is a natural process, but it's also a process that you do have some say in, okay? Because you may feel called to do things, but it's really a matter of your free will is involved. Okay, so if you suddenly start getting spirit beings talking to you, right, or something like that, you don't have to necessarily do what they say. Like, you're the one who's in charge. So that's a really important thing, is that the whole thing is an activation of you becoming aligned with your highest self. And part of that is to begin to step into your own power, which is to realize that you do have a say in what happens in your life. And in fact, you are a divine creator of your own life. And so this process happens, and part of it is just, it's sort of like being a toddler again, learning how to walk, because it's a whole other different way of going through the world. And there may be like a toddler, when they start to walk, they stumble, they fall, they don't know what things are, they try to express themselves, and that's why toddlers get so frustrated, right? So it's part of this whole process, is learning to kind of find the peace within.
Absolutely.
And
And that's what I was going to say, is that,
yeah.
with Theta Healing, because we work at a cellular level, just human beings in general, just because of what we've inherited, as Ona's brought up, in past lives, that we have a tendency to make things harder than what they actually are.
Mhm.
So we're going to do a little work on that later, right? Because we always
Awesome.
end with a
Yes.
little bit of Theta Healing work. But that's the thing. It's like your spiritual awakening can be what you want it to be.
Yeah.
And so if you want it to be hard, if you want to resist it, if you want to, deny it, guess what? It's going to feel hard. If you want to be with it and embrace it, it can be something really lovely. But I think probably just having an awareness that that's possible, that you could have a spiritual awakening, and that it may be something different than anything you've ever experienced before.
Mhm.
Right. So again, anybody that you feel like needs to hear this, that, tag and share it. So tell me about your soul visioning process, Ona.
Okay, yeah. So I am by profession a writer and an artist. I've been an artist since I was old enough to hold a crayon, and that was always the way that, as I look back, I didn't understand at the time, but that was the first and primary way that I consistently tuned into spirit, right? Because I noticed especially when I was in college, I started noticing the images that came through the paintings. I'd realize a couple years later, oh, well, a couple years later, things would happen, and it was very symbolic of what I had painted, and that was starting to be a consistent pattern. Well, I didn't really quite understand it until I had my own spiritual awakening process a few years back, and started to be recognized that I could actually tune into a person, and an image would come in, and that image would have a symbolic meaning that pertained to that person, and that if I could share that with that person, that um, it could help them too. So it took, I mean, it was something that took a long time for me to piece together. In the meantime, I got certified in Reiki. I got certified in a process called energy scanning, and I had a couple of mentorships with spiritual mentors, and learned a lot, along the way. But the soul visioning process kind of came in piece by piece. It's really my own type of modality, and a lot of it is just spirit led. So it's like I tune into a person, and a lot of it depends on what the person's needs are. Um, but it's like I connect with, a lot of times, their spirit guides, their angels, their spirit animals. They're I just am given information about them to assist them in their journey, and given also the information that will help them. Whether sometimes it's a healing process where we go through, and it's just the energy moves and there's healing that happens. Other times it's more of a mentoring and assisting them, and sometimes spirit gives me protocols for, like, I could call it homework, certain things that will help them. We can take a look at their chakras and figure out what's going on with those, which ones maybe are calling for balance, or kind of what's going on. And so it is, the reason I call it soul visioning is just to give a name to it, because it is rather eclectic, but it's always very powerful. And also, when I work with a person, I always do include the art with it, because and I'd like to touch upon that too. But that is part of the healing, to be receiving these images and actually to be seen, to be fully seen, is a very healing process in and of itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think that as human beings, we have a tendency to hide ourselves and
Yeah.
even hide ourselves, because of pain, as the result of trauma, non forgiveness, beliefs, we hide ourselves. And that's one of the biggest things that social media is allowing people to be seen.
Yeah.
It gives them an avenue if they want to, right? And to be able, like we're, 10 years ago, we couldn't even think about interviewing somebody and being on video with somebody without it being at great expense and buying airtime and everything else. And so social media, good, bad, or indifferent, allows these opportunities. YouTube,
Yes.
it allows these opportunities to be able to get information and
Right.
hear about people's experiences that help us along our journey. So is it, and so Ona, when you do, so is it that you do a session with somebody and the art is included in that?
Um, yes, when I do a session with somebody, well, we'll meet typically over Zoom, and because I've worked with people all over the world, and so we'll meet and we'll do the session, and typically a lot of times it's very much like a guided journey, or if you've ever been on a shamanic journey, it can turn into this a very, very interactive, almost like your personal guided journey, but it's like it's hard to explain, but it's like we're both sort of in that journey at once, and experiencing it both. But then along with each session, and usually it's all tune in after the session, and I'll create a drawing that represents, it's a symbol or an image that carries some of that energy from the session. It'll be a healing image, so it's sort of like if you're aware of um, some of the like religious art from various traditions. If you think of some of the Buddhist mandalas or the temple art or things like that, a lot of them are very symbolic, or they'll have deities or spirit guides or whatever it is. So those kind of things, sometimes sacred geometry, that kind of thing will come through into a drawing, and it's all very individual for that person. So it's like a little power drawing, sort of like your own little, you can use it for meditation, or just it will be a portal for some healing energy for you.
Pieces like that are always so powerful.
Yeah.
And especially when it is, you know, in conjunction with having healing work and being part of your journey. I don't even know if people can imagine. If you've never had an experience of having a piece of art that is done in conjunction with your healing journey, you'd be in for a treat. It's always
Yeah.
really beautiful, really synchronistic, healing, loving, all the great words that you want to have in a session that you get to carry on and have it with you. So,
Right. Yeah. So, and actually, this is an example. This is not of a healing session, because that would be a simpler drawing. But this is a painting that's actually in progress. But a lot of my paintings are really kind of supporting the collective at this point. And so this is, I'm feeling like I'm probably going to be doing a series on the tree of life. So this is almost like this little sprouting tree. And right now, as I mentioned, we're in this sort of global awakening process. A lot of people are just starting this. And so it's this, the tree of life is so symbolic of, this it's life, right? But
right.
it's this whole other level of life that's waking up for us, and so this little sprouting tree coming up with the kind of rainbowy, and like I said, it's in progress, so it could change quite a lot, but just sort of a little example of the type of art that you'll see coming out from this process. And I also will do custom pieces. You know, if a person wants me to just tune into them and come out with a full-fledged painting, I'll do that as well. Or if they want me to kind of tune in and see their angel or their spirit animal and do a painting like that. So
That is
that's
so
another
cool.
avenue.
So, what is the miracle zone?
Ah, yes. Okay. So before I answer that question, I want to distinguish between the terms awakening and ascension. Because awakening is this process of becoming aware of the spiritual world. But ascension, you have to understand that everything is energy and everything's vibration. And the higher frequency that we vibrate at, the the more, I guess, refined and so forth our spiritual body becomes. And so that's what's known as ascension, is this process of raising vibration. So not every, you can be having an awakening process and not be ascending, and this happens sometimes. It's possible to get into these loops, which is why it's helpful to have people guide you. You can get on this kind of loop in the awakening process and be on that treadmill for a long time. Or there are people that, and I won't go too much into this, but go into the dark arts, and then they're, you know, you're not actually raising your vibration, you're actually lowering it. So the process of ascension is actually, to be put in simpler terms, we're getting closer and closer to God as we raise our frequency. And it becomes, you start to more fully embody your higher self, which is the aspect of you that's more fully connected with the divine, right? And so the miracle zone is what I refer to as, at some point you kind of make this shift, because when you start this whole process, usually you're coming out of what we call a third dimensional reality, which is kind of like your what we think of as the normal everyday. And usually it's kind of that, like the stress, it's a survival based kind of thing, right? And when we start the awakening thing, we move into what's called the fourth dimensional realm, which is sort of this, you're aware of all the spiritual stuff, but it's kind of like a chaotic kind of thing. It's almost like I liken it to moving from the ground up. If you're taking off in a jet plane and moving up through the air, you get this the zone of turbulence where all these things are happening, and then you go up above the clouds, and all of a sudden things become smooth and the sun's out, and no matter what's happening, there could be thunderstorms or stuff, but you're above the clouds and the sun's out and it's beautiful. And this is what happens when we get through this. Like, there's always going to be more levels, there's always more of a journey, and there's always more cycles, but this three-dimensional through the fourth dimensional into this what we call the fifth dimensional, where it's things even out and it becomes easier. And this is a zone of manifestation, so that you start to find that as you imagine things, as you envision things, they start to become a reality very quickly. And this is why it's not actually miracles, because it is within, you know, it is within spiritual law. It is within the laws of the universe. We never go outside of those. But I love the word miracle because it feels so miraculous when these things start to happen. It's like, oh my gosh, I thought that and now it's happening. And it's not witchcraft. It's that your vibration has raised to the higher level. And I'm not dissing witchcraft either, because that's a whole other discussion, but it's really not. And so there are people that are scared about it. It's not. It's like you've raised your vibration to the point where you're able to manifest things, because your vibration has become at a pure enough level that, and I want to say that our, you know, whatever your vibration that you're putting out, you're always influencing your environment anyway, but you just get to this level where it influences at a much faster rate and to a much greater degree, because you've got that frequency.
Absolutely. And when we raise our vibration, we are like overcoming, right? The noise.
Right,
So that's why
right.
manifestation
Yeah.
is so much easier And it's also why you have to be aware of what you're thinking and saying.
Exactly, right. And I also want to say this is not a religious thing. It's a spiritual thing. And I have met people who are Christians. I have met people who are Jewish. I have met people who, I've known of people who are Hindu, who are Native American, who are whatever spiritual tradition you come from. They all ultimately are paths, because you can use those religious traditions. They can be very helpful to get there, but it is not something that is owned by any one tradition.
Right.
That there are many, many, many ways, many, many paths,
That's
and they're
right.
not always
And
religious
I
either.
always say there
You
are
know, art
many
is one
roads
path.
to getting, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
There are many roads to get where we want to head. It's
yeah,
deciding how do you want your path to be?
right. Yeah,
Easy, hard, beautiful, supported by beautiful art, or,
right. What brings you joy? What brings you bliss? And really, I feel like that's one of the big keys is, really, like Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, he had this wonderful advice that he gave to his students. He said, "Follow your bliss," and it's become a cliche, but it really is true, because it's like we are so ingrained sometimes to um, to feel guilty about pleasure, and to feel like we have to really work hard, or if we're not suffering, it's not, you know, we're not earning it. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I always looked to nature as the ultimate template for how to live. And every creature in nature is imbued with pleasure, right? It knows to seek pleasure. And it doesn't feel guilty about seeking pleasure. The animal will go for food, it will find a mate, but it does so without guilt or shame. And this doesn't mean that we go and be greedy, right? Because it's part of it to have that balance. But I think so many of us have learned to feel guilty about pleasure, and to put off what makes us happy and what gives us joy, because we think we have to earn it. And really, it's like, what does bring you bliss, right? And allow yourself that.
I feel like that what happens for a lot of people, as far as they are disconnected with whoever their higher divine being is, and then they want to take out of context what they've learned from religion or the Bible, and they prolong their suffering, or they prolong, I always say that, and it's very common, I see it all the time, 14 years doing, this juncture, being on my own path for 29 years. It's that what I see is that people want, they think that the suffering is eventually going to get them to heaven. Like they create this whole life, however long they're on this earth, and they suffer the whole time because they feel like they're going to end up in a place where there will be no suffering.
Right.
Whereas, really, honestly, if you read the Bible, if you really look into what's being said, it's like, no, create heaven now, create your bliss now.
Right.
And then when you leave this physical being, right, then it's just a quick pivot, a quick acquiescing into that next level of bliss, of heaven,
Absolutely.
whatever you want to call
Absolutely.
it. So it's not like, oh, well, I don't need to do that because I just, I'll skip all those steps when I die. It's like, would you like to have something a little bit better than what is going on now, which is very, very possible, which is why I end up being asked to speak on that it's possible to make money during COVID, because so much is out there that people want to believe that there's no money, so they can't make it.
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
studies have shown that more millionaires are made during a recession, during a downturn, because the people who are smart enough to know, to see opportunities, again, not at the expense of people, or, like I said, not, like hoarding, hand sanitizer, but in ways that can truly serve people and help people.
Right.
They opportunities come about, and again, are you paying attention?
Are you
Are
paying attention? And don't assume that what you have to offer can't, is but the people aren't going to want it during a recession. Don't assume that. I have sold more originals this year than I ever have. Big
right?
ones.
Exactly. It's like, there you
This is
go.
art. I mean, people think of art, starving artists. That's just, bull. It just is. And so whatever it is that your real soul calling is, and there's the thing, it's like not what you think it ought to be and not what somebody else thinks it ought to be for you, but what's your soul calling? What really brings you joy? What do you feel like you're just like, this is what you would do if you didn't have to think about, all the mundane things.
I always say if time and money weren't an option, right? If they
Time
didn't
and
have
money weren't an
to,
option, right?
take into
The what
consideration.
you would do, no matter whether you were paid to do it or not, this is what brings you bliss. And, whether or not you make a business out of it doesn't matter, but allowing yourself to do it. And if it is something that you're called to do professionally, then don't sell yourself short. Because if you're
Absolutely.
guided to do that, if you really are, then there's a way.
And I also feel like, too, again, another point is that art is one of those things that people view when money is aplenty, or it's one of those things when people have a large disposable income, right? And so if she sold more art this year than she has in previous years, again, it goes against what people
And not
when there's
always to
no
super
money.
rich people either. It's like if the people see the value in it, to them, they like look at tattoos. Tattoos are not inexpensive. Everybody, and I mean, there's plenty of people that apparently don't have two dimes to rub together, but they buy tattoos, right? Because it's meaningful to them and it's healing in some way, at some level. The art is the same way, right? And whatever it is that you do to make a living, it's
Right.
going to be valuable in some way to somebody.
And they found money. That's the deal,
And they
right?
found the money, right? They
Right.
found it.
Because if you offer something that people want and they find value with it, they will find the money.
Right. The
It's just
thing
kind of
is,
how it
it's got
works.
to be true, right? It's got to be really resonant. Because if you're just trying to go out there and maybe, maybe you love to do math and you're trying to be an artist and it's really not where your heart is, good luck trying to be an artist, right? Maybe you should go and do some math, and see where that takes you, because that will probably open up doors for you.
Well, and when we're talking about art, we know that you incorporate your creative talents as part of your healing modality. So, how can the arts help people who are experiencing a spiritual awakening?
Oh, that's a great, great question. Well, one reason is that the art speaks in the language of the soul. It speaks in metaphor. It speaks in archetype. Okay, because we're dealing with like the deep subconscious and the deep unconscious, and it's not a mental process. It's I mean, it's mental in a way, but it's not like your cognition that we're trained to in school be the logical part of our brains. It works, it's more this right brain process, and symbol, metaphor, archetypes, and these are ways it's like encoded in any particular image. You can take an image like this little tree, like a tree. It's a simple image. You can see it, and it can register in the blink of an eye, but there is so much symbolism that goes into a tree. You could literally write books on it. So when they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, it really is, but that's a language. And if you think of, sometimes you'll have a dream and it'll have all this symbolic imagery in it. And they're like, what does this mean? And at some point, you may understand what that symbolism is, and it all becomes really clear. It's like, oh, that's what that is. But with art, you can, and I've had this happen. I just did an art workshop, and the people that have been in my visionary art workshops, you just kind of tune in, and without thinking, the images come through. And then you can look at them afterwards and see that it's like, oh, what does that mean? And sometimes the symbols will come through for you in the art, just like they do in a dream, and you don't even know what it means. And sometimes you have to look it up, right? And then you find out, oh, well, that's a symbol that means this, and I didn't even know that.
Right.
But that's what it means, and suddenly it'll shed light on something that you've been beating your head against the wall to try to understand with your logical brain, maybe for months or years. And the symbol comes through from the subconscious, from the unconscious, from the higher realms, right? And it tells you right there in that little symbol. So this is the power of art, and any of the arts, actually. There's part, and even just the vibration of the colors. Just like in music, there's vibration. There's so much healing in music where everybody's aware of that. And it's the same with art. The colors, the shapes, the forms, they themselves have encoded in them healing that you can receive through the viewing.
As you can see, like it's right behind her as well. Like I know everybody's like looking at Ona going, it's a great painting. I love that. It's like beautiful behind her. It makes her look like, so it's great. So we're going to do a little theta healing on some things that Miss Ona has said. And as always, I always make sure. So again, this is very complimentary. This is something that would help with your soul visioning process and allow you to get out of your way easier, which is we're going to do a little work to help people with that. And it also will, it bypasses the brain because again, that's where we get stuck is in our head. So it bypasses the conscious and subconscious. It makes changes on a cellular level, and it's as if it's always been. And that's why processes like what Ona's talking about gives us insight, either on what work we still have to be done that we can do very quickly with theta healing, or the changes that we have had happen and that it becomes apparent to us. Because like with theta healing, it's always as if it's always been. So sometimes we don't have that awareness that we're doing things differently. We're just doing it, which is the beautiful part about theta healing. But then we can do something like create a piece of art and see, engage.
Well, a lot of times you do access those theta states of being, states of mind, and when you're in any kind of a meditative practice, and art practice, and musicians get into it. It's called being in the groove, right?
Right.
Often it will be, sometimes it actually goes into that theta. It's different parts of different levels of the mind, but
absolutely. And that's why we also say when people want to learn this process, it's just a reminder of what you already know.
right.
But for most people, we're not doing it intentionally. And there's so
Right.
many things that you can
Yes,
do
absolutely.
when you're
Yeah.
aware of it. And there are
Yeah.
so many things that you can heal as a result of it. And so that's why it's a beautiful place to go. So well, we always make sure that people have 3 beliefs in place before I do any theta healing work. And it's I want an instant healing, I deserve an instant healing, and an instant healing is possible. So again, we want to say yes out loud, and we want to say yes in the comments, even if you're watching the replay, because any of the work, you'll get it, even if you're not watching it live. So we get it on the replay as well. So Ona, as my featured guest, gets to cue you on when to say yes out loud. So here are the 3 basic beliefs if you haven't had those yet. I want an instant healing. I deserve an instant healing, and instant healing is possible. If you would like those, just say yes out loud and yes in the comments below. All right, Ona.
So yes, yes, I want an instant healing. Yes, I absolutely believe it's possible. What was the last one? Yes, I deserve it. Absolutely.
The thing that I find really helpful for people is to have their divine definitions. So when we get a divine definition, that allows us to, again, I always say, like, if my definition of letting go is that somebody else gets their way, it doesn't serve me, it's painful, I got to tell you, I won't let go very often. But if my divine definition is that I trust and know it's for my highest and best good and it'll allow me to flow with ease in my journey, when it's appropriate, I'll probably do it. Right? I'm not saying that that's the definition, but I'm just saying if that were it, can you tell the difference? So, divine definitions, I just wrote a few things down. Power, activation, ascension, and vibration. One, so we can understand all those components. But what we'll also get is, what does it feel like? We'll be in alignment with that divine definition. We'll know what it feels like. So if we know what something feels like, it cuts down the learning curve. We'll also know that it's possible, because it's got to be possible for us to be able to draw it in, for us to be able to do it, and then it's safe. Because that's the big reason why a lot of people don't do things, out of fear, because it doesn't feel safe, and how it serves us, so that we can understand, like, okay, I get why I want to do this. I get why and to be able to know, like, to be able to gauge where you're at in your process with those divine definitions. Am I activating? Am I ascending? Like, where am I? And then be in your knowing with it. So if you would like the definitions to be in alignment with your divine definitions on power, activation, ascension, and vibration, just say yes out loud.
Yes.
Let's also change what obligates, which means we don't have a choice. Again, it's all about choices. For me, it's all about being objective, so that we're in a non-reactive state to whatever's going on, but also being able to have a choice. So we want to remove the obligation. That is, let me look here, keep myself on, that we have to make things harder for ourselves than what they need to be or what they can be. So we want to change that we're obligated to make things harder than what they are. So if you'd like to change that, just say yes.
Yes.
And then let's also change what prevents us from being impervious to other people's thoughts and feelings. Because again, and it means you have a choice. So there are times when it's beautiful to be a part of the group consciousness vibration that is rising. And you want to be able to have the choice to not be involved in the group consciousness vibe that is lowering, right? So again, we want to be able to be an empath, like to be able to feel people, to understand people, but we don't want it to affect our journey, our ascension, our vibration, wherever you're at in your process. So, and then also let's change the obligation to compare, because there's no comparison. We're each on our own. It looks differently. It may look the same in some ways, which is lovely because it's a great confirmation and validation, but everybody's an individual. So let's celebrate being individuals and in this individual process. So if you would like those downloads, just say yes.
Yes.
Nice. Anything else that you want to add, Ona, other than this offer that you have for people?
I just want to add that if you are finding yourself entering a spiritual awakening, if you've been feeling confused or even scared or alone or anything, just know that you are not alone and that there is tremendous support for you. And there are lots of actual flesh and blood people like Brenda and me that are here to support you, but you also have your what we call your spirit team. Like you've got a direct connection to source, and you have angels and all sorts of beautiful support around you. So just be aware that you can ask for things to become, to unfold with as much grace and ease and, as possible. And just for the asking, it does help to create that reality that it can be
Absolutely.
easier. Yes.
Absolutely. So great point, Ona. Thank you. So tell them about what you what this awakening bliss guided meditation and coloring sheet.
Yeah, actually, it's like I went to create it because I was creating it this week, and it actually ended up being a soul calling activation prayer. It's actually I was going to do a guided meditation, and my own guidance was like, no, you gotta share this prayer that you've been using, because it's a prayer that I've just has it's it's been evolving, but I've used it almost daily for the past few years, and it really has helped me to get very clear on my purpose, get clear on um, my soul mission, and helped tremendously in the manifestation process. In this past few years, I've met my soulmate, bought a house, moved in with them. My business is aligning. I mean, just all this amazing things happening, and it's I mean, there's no one thing that I can point to, but that prayer has been a very powerful practice that I feel has been very instrumental in this manifestation process and this ascension awakening, this whole process that I've been on. And so I've been really guided to share that. So I put it together as a PDF that you can actually read. I've recorded it as an MP3 and audio that you can listen to. Um, and also there's a coloring sheet that's just it's a piece of art. It's kind of calling on the butterfly spirit within us, and that you can use to just, whether you're listening to the prayer or, if you just want to chill for a while, it's a great way to relax and get into that maybe more peaceful, calm, heart-centered space that's really important. And maybe that's one other thing I'd like to say is getting to that heart space is huge. It's huge. And if there's one practice I'd suggest that can be super helpful, as for anybody at any stage, is to work with the heart energy. Get into the heart. A simple way to do that, you can put your hand on your heart, kind of touch your heart with your fingertips, and if you just breathe in and out of the heart space, it helps you to center, come into that heart kind of awareness, and that is a shift in and of itself. Really brings you to yourself.
So we'll have the link in the comments below so that you can have access to that. Again, I have a Facebook group called the Wealth Vibe Acceleration. It's all about, every day we do a little something to help support you in your vibration and raising it and maintaining it, whatever you're needing. And I also have a meditation as well. So everything's in the post that you can have access to it as well. So please comment, please like, please share, and make sure that with the work, whether you're watching live or replay, that you're saying yes out loud and you're putting yes in the comments as well. So Ona, thank you so much for joining me. Again, I love the timing of this. I love the day that we're doing this. I love it all. I think it's perfect.
Worked out perfectly, and thank you so much for having me on. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. And so keep in mind, guys, that we always do the Theta Power Hour every week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And next week we are having, let me look it up really quick. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's her name is Agnes, and I'm going to butcher her last name, Rizzotti. And we're going to be doing the changes needed to do more in less time, right? Because
Ooh.
timelines are changing and everything else. So this is beautiful. So she's not super woo woo, but I think it's, again, you got to have both. We got to have the
Oh,
practical,
yeah,
we got to have the woo
absolutely.
woo, we got to put it together and incorporate it and blend it, whatever's great for you.
Right. Yeah, and that's really important to point out because like I tend to do the woo-woo speak, but and I've had clients to say, can I be in corporate and still do this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. These principles apply, and it does not matter what side of the political fence you are on. There's people who are tuning in and raising their vibe on all sides of all political fences. It doesn't matter, right? And if you're in corporate America, if you're self-employed, if you're a farmer, if you're a banker, it doesn't matter. And it's like we need to raise vibration everywhere, and it's happening. So, and you don't have to use the woo-woo speak. um,
Absolutely. I work primarily with mainstream. So
yeah,
I'm laughing because I'm like, I never get to really have this conversation and this vocabulary and this verbiage. It's like,
yeah,
yay,
yeah.
but I always say I can get as woo as you want. And I can be as mainstream as you want.
Right.
So
Yeah. And you
again, if
don't
it's
have to speak to spirit people either. You can speak directly to God. And in fact, that's probably the safest thing ever is speak directly to God, because or
absolutely
source or the one or whatever you want to call it
right.
doesn't matter.
But
But
make it your
it's
intention
there.
for it to be your divine power,
Yep.
whatever, however, whatever your name is. It's all good.
It's
So
all good. You don't even have to believe in it. It still works.
absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, Ona. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you again next week. And please join my group if you want more cool stuff and fun stuff that will help support you. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Brenda.